And we are back here at ABC News election headquarters here in New York. That is what it looks like in the House right now. Democrats have picked up one seat, one change. They need 23 to take control. Those are the overall numbers coming in the House right now. Of course, we're going to be following that all night long. We've also been talking to voters all day long as they leave the polls. World News anchor David Muir here with that. Let's talk about the issues that were top of mind.
Yeah, we heard so much from President Trump about caravan, Kavanaugh, law and order, as Cecilia pointed out at the top of the broadcast here. But when you dive into the issues, this is what voters said when they left the polls today. Most important issue facing the country. And look at this. By a large margin, 41% saying health care is the most important issue. 23% far behind that immigration, which has been Donald Trump's #1 topic in the final weeks of the campaign. 21% of the economy. Obviously, the president was hoping, the White House was hoping the economy would loom larger with those job numbers last Friday. But health care issue #1. And what a drastic change from midterms past, where health care could perhaps buoy some of these Democrats in races tonight, given the fact that it's now important and many Americans believe that perhaps the Democrats have made the better argument that they'll save pre-existing conditions.
Healthcare usually works against the last people who took action on the issue in midterm elections. I want to bring in Tom Yamas to take a deeper dive into some of these numbers coming in the key Senate races. Let's start with Indiana there. What are you seeing?
All right, George, so we can see that bronze slightly on top here. Senator Donnelly in a little bit of trouble, but only 46% so far of that votes in. Let's take a deeper dive here. And, you know, the problem for Democrats here is that it's 4 versus 88. And what I mean by that is that Democrats pull most of their votes out of 4 counties, where Republicans pull out of 88 counties. In Indiana, they talk about donut counties, all these suburb counties around Indianapolis. George, during the break, I was looking at some of the data. The 4 counties that the Democrats pull from: Indianapolis right here, Marion, he's at 62%. Gary, Indiana, that's where the president just was. Lake County. And then over here, it's St. Joseph. This is where Notre Dame is. He's outperforming Hillary Clinton in each one of those counties.
And John Carl, of course, this is so important. The president spent a lot of time in Indiana, and of course, also the home state of Vice President Mike Pence.
He's been to Indiana more than any other state. 4 visits to Indiana. Mike Pence, his home state, been working it very hard. This is, they saw as perhaps their best chance outside of North Dakota to pick off a Democratic Senate seat.
And they're feeling good about what they see so far in the state of Indiana. Tom, let's take a look at Florida.
All right, let's take a look at Florida. Dug into some of the numbers here as well during our break. You know, George, when we talk about Florida, we split it up into 3 parts. We have South Florida, we have the Panhandle, and then we have the I-4, which I think will decide who wins this race. I was tracking the numbers early in South Florida. More diverse voters, younger voters, more Hispanics in South Florida. In Miami-Dade County, in Broward County, in Palm Beach County, Nelson's tracking pretty much what Hillary Clinton did. The problem right now here, we have 98% precincts reporting in South Florida, but overall in the state, let's see where we're at, 90 reporting. It's dead even. The problem for Nelson right now, there's a couple of these very small counties that are very red that could help Rick Scott. We'll have to wait and see. One good sign, Duval County, Jacksonville, Nelson's on top there. That's a bellwether. Republicans tend to do better there. That's a good number for him.
And what are we seeing in the governor's race in Florida?
In the governor's race at Florida, let's take a look. Let's jump over there. Of course, Andrew Gillum. Let's see here. Back in the governor's race. Zoom in here. Really close to George. DeSantis barely on top, 90% reporting. But again, we're basically seeing the same map. You know, we thought there'd be a lot of connection between Gillum and Nelson. It's almost exactly the same. Duval County, where DeSantis is actually from, Gillum's on top. You can see South Florida as well. It's the same thing. One good sign for Democrats that I'm seeing, they are picking up some of these blue counties, right? They're turning some of these counties blue in the I-4 corridor. Pinellas County, which is one of these bellwether counties we've been watching pretty closely. We know that Gillum's up there. 50 to 47. It's really, really close, though.
And George, very important point. 90% of Florida has reported, but only 51% of Broward County. That's a very solidly Democratic county down south, and only 75% of Miami-Dade County. There are a lot of Democratic votes in both those counties, and a lot of votes still to be counted.
Keeping an eye on that. I want to go to Florida right now. Whit Johnson is in Tallahassee, Gillum headquarters in Tallahassee. You had a bit of a rain scare earlier.
Yeah, George, that's right. We knew there would be drama in Florida on election night, but we weren't expecting the rain that we saw here. All the media had to be rushed off the platform for a period of time. We had power surges, power outages here, but the rain has cleared for a moment after some thunder and lightning. You can see behind me, this is Gillum headquarters here at Florida A&M University. The crowds have come in. They're starting to gather here. But we talked to voters throughout Florida here today, and all of them said the same message, that they were casting their votes not just for the local candidates, but really to either vote in support or against the Trump agenda. If we're looking at the governor's race, Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, an underdog, was not expected to win in the primary. He won with massive outside support. Bernie Sanders was an early supporter. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, millions of dollars came in from mega donors like Tom Steyer, like George Soros. He's going up against Ron DeSantis, the Republican, the congressman who actually resigned his seat so that he could focus on this race. He was in lockstep, all in on President Trump. President Trump endorsed him, basically handpicked him early on in the race, and it has been an ugly battle for governor here. Allegations of racism thrown towards DeSantis and some of his supporters, accusations of corruption towards Gillum and his camp. So it has been ugly, but they've been plowing forward. The Senate race, many people believe Bill Nelson, if he is to survive here in the state of Florida up against Governor Rick Scott, that it would likely have to be turnout. Supporters who were pushing for Gillum could help Nelson win.
Okay, Whit Johnson, thanks very much. Matthew Dad, let me bring you in on this, because this governor's race was interesting. You had in both Gillum and DeSantis the new faces in the Republican Party defeating in the primaries the established candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. They both beat the candidates that were supposed to win in this. And to me, Florida is one of these key states. The key states is it's a swing state, and both of these races there are going to go down to the wire.
Florida is such an important state every single year, midterms, presidential. Matthew Dowd, thanks very much. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Watching ABC News Live, and when George and the team take a break on the broadcast network, we keep it going up here in the skybox overlooking the main set at ABC News election headquarters. Such an interesting night thus far. It is a young night, however. And speaking of youth, we're getting voter engagement in these midterms like we've never seen before at all stages and all demographics. So let's take a look at how people are reacting on social media tonight. ABC's Kenneth Moten is watching that. Kenneth, what are you seeing?
Dan, you're right. The numbers are up across the board here, and a big portion of this country has still yet to cast their ballots, because we know that the polls are still open. As you mentioned, it's a young night here on the East Coast, and so the polls are still open in the Midwest and out west. And so what we're seeing is that a number of people are still standing in line. They've been standing in line for hours. There have also been reports of people whose voting machines have been working. Some of the polling places, there have been some technical issues. We'll get to that in just a moment, but let me take you to the board, and I can show you some candidates who are still telling people to stay in line, to continue voting, including this representative here, or this candidate for representative in California, who says, Charlie says, go vote and stay in line to the polls. Who is Charlie, you might ask? That guy right there. There's Charlie at the polling place saying, please go vote. Moving on, you see Jeff here, who says, power outage at my polling place this morning. So again, Dan, people reporting technical difficulties, and also that hashtag still trending, stay in line.
Stay in line even when the polls close. Kenneth Moten, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to you throughout the evening. We do have a projection we can make at this hour. In the state of New Jersey, in the race there in between Senator Bob Menendez, who's the incumbent, seeking a third full term in the United States Senate. He is projected to win. He beat his Republican challenger, Bob Hugin, a pharmaceutical executive. This is a notable race in part because Bob Menendez, during his most recent term, faced corruption charges on which he was not convicted. Let's go to ABC's Steve Osunsami, who's covering one of the hottest races of the night. That's in Georgia, where Democrat Stacey Abrams is making a run at a seat. Her challenger, the Republican Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. This is a race that has brought in Donald Trump, and also on the other side, Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey. Steve, the night is still young, but what at this point are you hearing?
Well, the exit polling that's come out has shown some advantage for Abrams in that more men are supporting Abrams than in previous elections, supporting the blue team. That is good news for the blue team, but it's really too early to make any calls right now. The polls are just about an hour, not even an hour closing, and there is at least a couple polls in Gwinnett County that are going to be staying open late. There were some voting irregularities, issues that were really the county's fault, that some of the counties are working on, but so far no indication yet of where this race is headed. Dan?
Steve Osunsami in Georgia, one of the hottest races. Steve, thank you. We'll be talking to you throughout the evening. I have with us ABC News ace congressional correspondent Mary Bruce. So great to see you. You have spent so much of this midterm season in red states where Democrats are running. Can you just give us a little tour through what you've seen?
Yeah, sure. These are the states that are really going to determine the future of the Senate. These are those 10 red states where Democratic senators are currently holding on for their political life, essentially. I spent a lot of time in Missouri, where Claire McCaskill's in a really neck-and-neck fight with Josh Hawley, in North Dakota, where Heidi Heitkamp is under a lot of scrutiny, especially after her decision on Kavanaugh, coming out and voting against the president's pick for the Supreme Court, and also in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin, a Democrat, could possibly hold on in a state that went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, the Trumpiest state in all of the country. And it's just remarkable to see how these moderate Democrats are trying to walk a fine line. They want to appease the president, vote with him on certain issues, but also, side with their party on others. And how they walk that is interesting, on what issues they decide to break with the president, how they can convince voters that even though they are in states that have such huge support for the president, that they can still work with him and break with him on certain issues.
This is such an interesting year because normally midterms are really hard on the party that controls the White House. And yet this year, Republicans are heavily favored to retain the Senate. And it all has to do with the map.
Yeah, it is really crazy when you look at the way that this breaks down. I think a lot of people wonder, well, how could one party be projected to win in the Senate, and yet, Democrats are facing such tremendous advantages in the House, and that comes down to the map. The Senate is going to be won in those red rural districts. That's the Senate battleground. When it comes to the House side, though, that is going to be won suburban areas, whiter areas, well-educated. A lot of people looking at what the moderates are doing, the independent voters there. So it's a completely different map. You have a tale of two elections happening tonight when you look at what's going on the Senate side and the House side. One
of the many, many, many fascinating storylines. ABC's Mary Bruce, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Great job as always. Let's go back in the skybox, as we call it affectionately. Some of us call it the kids' table. As we head back in here, let's take a look at some of the latest results we're seeing tonight. This is the House scoreboard, gives you a sense of where things stand. The Democrats have made a net gain of 1 seat. They need to gain 23 in order to take back control of the House. And if they're able to do that, that is going to change the very nature of the Trump presidency for the 2 coming years before 2020 and his presumed run for a second term. This is where things stand in the battle for the Senate. Democrats have 33 seats locked down. The Republicans 42. We were just talking about this. You need 51 seats to control the Senate. The Democrats need 2 in order to, they need a net gain of 2 in order to retain or to regain control of the Senate, which they have not had in quite some time. The odds are, as we've discussed, against them. Here's an example of why that is. In the state of Indiana, too early to make a projection, but the incumbent Democrat Joe Donnelly in this red state struggling against his Republican challenger Mike Braun. Again, too early to make a projection, but Joe Donnelly in a tough race in a red state. We do have one race we can project, and that's in the state of Rhode Island. The Democrat Gina Raimondo, the projected winner in the state of Rhode Island. As we said, as we send it back now to ABC's chief anchor George Stephanopoulos, every time he goes to break, we're going to swoop in and keep the information and analysis going.